Story 1. This happened quite a while back when I was 18 years old. I lived with my folks, even though I had recently moved on from secondary school. I just purchased another PC. Furthermore, after I was finished getting it set up, I posted my old one on Craigslist. It was just 2 years old. Yet, in those days that implied it was obsolete. It was a Dell PC with fair specs, and it was very nearly $2,000 fresh out of the box. I was asking for just $500 because more current workstations at the time were significantly better. After posting it on the web, I didn't need to wait long for a reaction. A person named Toby informed me I was inspired by the PC, but I needed to see it first. I needed to set up a chance to meet next week when I would be in Midtown. That way we could meet at a bistro or something like that. At the point when I proposed it, Toby said that he wanted it immediately. Therefore, I consented to allow him to approach my home. I realized gathering in a public place would be more brilliant. Be that as it may, our home was in suburbia, and I didn't have a vehicle. I realized it was apathetic and moronic, yet I gave him my residence. My folks weren't home, and I figured it'd be a speedy deal and that nothing would turn out badly. Toby appeared sometime thereafter, on a Saturday at around 7 p.m. I saw a more seasoned van maneuver into the carport, and a man got out. In any case, he was in good company. He had one more person with him. The two of them were no less than 30, a lot greater than me. When that's what I saw, I felt somewhat frightened. Something about their presence felt off. In any case, I forgot about the inclination. All things considered, they were only there to check a PC out. I let them in, and we set up in the kitchen. I started showing the PC to Toby, and afterward, his companion promptly requested that I utilize the restroom. I pointed him to the correct heading, which was not far off and down a short passage. Then, at that point, I zeroed in on showing the PC to Toby. Around 10 minutes passed while we were checking it out. I had deleted it in advance, so it was fundamentally running as new. Then, at that point, I unexpectedly understood that the other man hadn't gotten back from the washroom. "Hello, he's your companion." "Good," I asked Toby. "No doubt, you can take some time some of the time, just relax." He consoled me. I tuned in as intently as I could, and heard strides that weren't coming from the washroom region. They were coming from higher up. Since there were only the three of us in the house, I realized it was him. The restroom was on the fundamental floor, so there was not a great explanation for him to be up there. That was the point at which I began to overreact inside, however. I attempted to conceal it. I nonchalantly got some information about his companion once more, trusting my anxiety wasn't appearing. His reaction was cold and frightening. He put his hand on my shoulder, not in a well-disposed way, but rather with a ton of strain. He told me not to stress over it. His grasp was fixed agonizingly. Furthermore, at that time, I realized this was something other than a deal that turned out badly. We were being ransacked. That was most likely the arrangement all along. Alarm set in that I attempted to keep my poise. I advised Toby to take anything they desired and simply go, however. He didn't give up. His grasp on my shoulder felt hard. It resembled danger. What's more, I began to shake. I realized I needed to move quickly. I figured out how to split away and arbitrarily my father's office on the primary floor, locking the entryway behind me. I left my telephone on the kitchen table, which was a dumb slip-up. Fortunately, however, there was a landline in the workplace where I was, so that saved me. My heart was beating as I dialed 911. Making sense of the circumstances for the dispatcher. The man is trusting that the police will show up on the longest day of his life. I could hear the two men stepping around the house, most likely taking anything they might find. They probably realized the police were on their way, since they took off in no time and cleaned out the front window as they returned to the van on the carport and dashed away. At the point when I was certain they were gone, I emerged to see what was taken. The main things I saw missing on the fundamental floor were the little television in the kitchen and the PC that I was selling. Notwithstanding, I later figured out that a large portion of my mother's gems were taken, as well as no less than $200 in real money. The police appeared around 10 minutes after the burglars left. They remained for some time. However, at that point, they left without making any commitments. He was unacceptable. That was the last I heard from the police about what occurred. I contacted them a few times, yet they never hit me up. At the point when my folks and sister returned home, I needed to make sense of what occurred. They generally thought I was kidding from the outset since I have a dull, funny bone. Yet, when they figured out it was genuine, they were distraught as well. I would gauge the misfortunes at around $3,000, which was a tremendous amount of cash for me at that point. Since it was all my issue, I needed to take care of it. That was essentially my entire summer of work down the channel. Was the last time I met an unusual individual off the web. If I was ever to rehash it, there'd be no chance I would allow them to come to my place. It's a public or private arrangement with no exemptions. Story 2. Quite a while ago, I had a truly dreadful encounter. I own my home, which is a duplex. I live on one side while leasing the other. An old house looks sad outwardly. However, the inside is well refreshed. There are 3 rooms in each house and just a solitary washroom, which is at the highest point of the steps, which is no different for my place and the rental. My occupants at the time were a youthful family, guardians, and 3 children. They were incredible inhabitants, never late on a lease, and consistently agreeable. In any case, as their family developed, so did their requirement for space. It was a tight fit for a group of 5, particularly as the children were progressing in years. From what I heard, they tracked down a larger house, yet it was very far away in another turn of events, around 2 hours away. They had lived there for right around 5 years, so I was miserable to see them go. Be that as it may, it was most certainly for something good. At the point when they moved out, they abandoned a couple of things, an old kitchen table, and a lot of children's toys. Before they went, the mother inquired as to whether it was acceptable for them to leave those things there. They lacked the opportunity to manage them, so I was glad to allow them to leave it. It is possible that I would sell them or leave them for the following tenants whenever they were gone. I went into clean paint and did a few minor fixes. In the room, there was an old kitchen table and a little heap of toys, probably that the children had outgrown. I understood immediately that it wouldn't appear to be legit to leave them in the unit. So I put them on Craigslist that night when I was finished with my work. The table went rapidly. Be that as it may, the toys didn't get as much interest as I expected a long time before I received a message. I was intrigued. We set up a period for him to drop by and get them. I requested that he come on a Saturday evening since I would have been around day in and day out. In the first part of the day, I was in the rental wrapping up certain fixes, generally fixing up certain things in the walls. By noon, I was on my side of the duplex. That was the point at which I heard a vehicle pull up. Looking through the window, I saw a beat-up old track that seemed as though it was from the mid-90s. It was there, and I could see a weak haze of smoke encompassing it. The person who ventured out was an ordinary-looking, moderately aged person of a normal level, wearing a baseball cap and shades. As he approached the house, I thought something didn't add up about him. He moves gradually. However, other than that, I can't explain why I was frightened by him. At the point when he at long last came to the entryway, I had proactively approached it and gone out. I went over and said hello. "Hi, I'm hanging around for the toys," he said. "Sure, they're right inside," I answered, driving him into the rental where the toys were stacked up. I motioned for him to come into the following room. Be that as it may, he didn't follow. Rather, he waited in the entryway, examining the room. "Where could the children be?" he asked unexpectedly. "They moved out." I explained to him that that is the reason we're selling the toys. His face then changed. It wasn't precisely disillusionment, but more like disturbance. I simply needed to say, "Hey," he mumbled. I expressed nothing, gave him an off-kilter grin, and attempted to lead him into the room where the toys were, once again, even accompanying me. He just remained in the entryway. Having like a youngster, his advantage over the children was unpleasant. In any case, I figured I could be, by and large, excessively jumpy. "Do you need the toys?" I inquired, trusting he would simply take them and leave. I was just asking for $20 for the parcel. In any case, I simply needed God to remain in the entryway. His eyes were focused on the floor when I glanced back at him. However, at that point, he turned upward and said no. Then, at that point, he left without another word. At that point, he hadn't even seen the toys. It was exceptionally abrupt in the manner in which he took off. The man didn't claim to be keen on the toys. I couldn't say whether he planned to grab the children or something like that. It's difficult to perceive how he was arranging that since he realized there would be a grown-up there. Perhaps he was coming to look into them and take action some other time. Or then again, perhaps I'm adding a lot to it. After he left, I locked the entryway and remained there, attempting to shake off the uncomfortable inclination. I contemplated whether I ought to call the police or what I might say. A person came to get some toys and posed an odd inquiry. My brother by marriage is a cop, so I called him to request counsel. He let me know that, although the story was unpleasant, there wasn't anything that might be finished. No regulations were broken. In any case, I feel that person should have been watched, and I stress over what he could get up to. Story 3. This occurred throughout the late spring before my last year of school. I chose to move to a school outside my old neighborhood since I was prepared for a change. Likewise, my new city was a superior spot to get a new line of work. So I concluded that going out there for my last year would be better. Since I didn't realize anyone was out there, I expected to track down a spot before moving. My late spring position went until the second last 7-day stretch of August. So doing that was extreme. In the evenings, I was looking on the web to find a spot that was getting frantic as time went on. So I was conveying a great deal of messages, in any event for where I would truly not like to reside. However, I tracked down a posting for a room that appeared to be very great, reasonable, all around found, and the perfect size. The photos were fair to nothing fancy except spotless and brilliant. It was a room in a house with flatmates, every one of whom was an understudy at my school. I was amped up for that since I had no companions around. The landowner and I sent a couple of messages to and fro, and we chatted on the telephone. He said it was all right if we never met face to face, however. He needed first and last month's lease before he would give me the spot. I was anxious about that. In any case, it appeared as though there could have been no other decision. I wired the cash as he inquired. Then, at that point, he sent me a letter to sign. Everything looks genuine. When I marked it and sent it back, I was feeling significantly better that I at last had someplace to reside. My mid-year work finished only 14 days after the fact, so I went to my new home. The drive to my new city was long, around 8 hours, and my vehicle was topped off with all that I claimed. At the point when I at last pulled up to the location, the house before me very closely resembled what I was anticipating. It was old, yet it looked very well kept up with for an understudy house, at any rate. I left my vehicle in the city and snatched my rucksack from the front seat. I was anticipating that the landowner should be sitting tight for me since I expected to get the keys. We conversed with you during your prior hours, so we knew when I would have been there. I approached the house and rang the doorbell. Following the brief, somebody replied, checking out at me in a befuddled way. The individual who addressed me seemed to be an understudy around my age, one of my new flatmates. I assumed I made sense of the fact that I was there for the room and inquired as to whether the property manager was there. The individual then let me know that I should have an unacceptable location. Since there were no vacant rooms in that house, I am sorry, and I strolled back to my vehicle. Then, at that point, I took out my telephone to ensure the location was correct. Everything matched up, so I didn't have any idea what was happening. I had a go at calling the landowner, yet he didn't reply. That is the point at which it hit me. The person I've been conversing with wasn't aware of the house. It was a trickster who took my cash and left me abandoned. I was out a ton of money with no place to remain in a city where I knew nobody. I felt absurd, furious, and completely alone. I spent the following couple of hours at a nearby cafe, utilizing their Wi-Fi to look for convenience and to report the trick. I was unable to find any place to remain that wasn't excessively costly. So I went through the night in my vehicle. Fortunately, it was summer. The following day, I had a decision to make. I could either remain there or continue to search for a place to commute home. Since school started in a little more than 7 days, the decision was straightforward. I expected to say soon thereafter that I had detailed the trick to the police and Craigslist. I didn't have a lot of expectation of getting my cash back when I conversed with the police. They assumed that they could follow the cash moves that I utilized. They generally like to assume the trickster could have been idiotic enough not to think about it. That did little for me right now, however, because my generally strict spending plan was far more atrocious. I spent the following 2 evenings in my vehicle until the police finally came up. It was a room in an enormous cellar loft with 6 flatmates, a few of whom shared rooms. It was a genuine prison-looking sort of spot. Yet, it was superior to my vehicle. The lease was modest, however. It was most certainly the most obviously awful spot I've at any point lived in. Eventually, I do get my cash back, and the phony property manager was gotten. As the official told me, they had the option to follow the cash move to an expendable email address that was connected to the person's genuine location. It was straightforward enough for the digital violations unit. I don't figure he did any jail time. In any case, he got a little probation and a fine. That is sufficient, I presume. I was only happy to get my cash back. Story 4. Set off for college from 2006 until 2010. Furthermore, this occurred in the late spring between my first and second years. I had spent the initial 3 months of the break working for my father, however our agreement finished toward the start of August. Without any work, I chose to move to the city where I planned to school and spent the last month of my break there. My companions and I had a house that we were at that point paying rent for, so that is where I planned to go. I had 2 flatmates, and neither of them was visiting the area at this point, so I was fundamentally alone consistently. The vast majority of my time was spent marathon watching the television program Lost on my PC that went downhill sooner or later, so I began searching for work since it was somewhere around a month before school began couldn't figure out a full opportunity work. All things being equal, I was after arbitrary, unspecialized temp jobs on Craigslist in our school's message board. I've done a couple of long periods of work to a great extent. One person employed me for the day to tidy up some development mass, generally clearing up after the project workers left. Some other time, I went through a day helping someone who manages old trees, simply irregular stuff like that. I was at home one day looking at Craigslist when I saw another posting, so we wanted assistance moving appeared to be clear. So I gave them a message. The answer came rapidly, and we organized to meet the next day. I didn't appreciate it at that point. Simply one more day of work. Ideally, he gets me in a huge white van. We traded welcomes and brief merriments. He let me know his name was Kevin. And afterward, we went off. As we drove, we didn't say a lot, simply a periodic gesture and snort and reaction to my endeavors at casual banter. Not no joking matter or anything, but rather it was awkward. He appeared to be abnormal, however that was fine. We were on the parkway for some degree 30 minutes. Also, I didn't have a clue about the local we were in. However, it looks decent. Now, in any event, we pulled up to a house in a local that seemed to be all the others. It was a genuine cutout neighborhood where each house was one of a few distinct plans. It was new because a portion of the houses was still under development. I got the feeling that the vast majority of them weren't involved at this point, since not many of the houses had any vehicles left in the carport. Also, I didn't see numerous different vehicles or individuals strolling. The one we pulled up to was a 2-story dim block house with an extra wide carport. There were no lights on that I could see. What's more, the drapes were undeniably shut. He stopped in the carport, and we both got out. I made a beeline for the front entryway, anticipating that he should follow and ring the doorbell, however he didn't. All things being equal, Kevin advised me to pause and vanish around the back. I thought it was odd, yet stood by in any case. Perhaps he was checking if the secondary passage was opened, or something like that. At long last, he returned and opened the front entryway from inside, motioning for me to come in. The house was great, yet something was off. There were no containers, no pressing tape, none of the standard moving tumult. It seems to be a truly decent, practically wonderful house. It was perfect, and it had the vibe of a model home. We began with the television, a major massive thing that took the two of us to convey, and then, at that point, some furnishings. We completed them to the van. Furthermore, in no time, we were full. However, there was an irritating inclination in the pit of my stomach the entire time. I realized something wasn't correct. Since it was another region, how could anyone be moving out? Stuff occurs. Also, that was most certainly odd. Additionally, for how much stuff there was, it would presumably take us another 10 van loads in any event. At the point when we were making a beeline for the van, I was truly dubious of Jam, considering it. I had no evidence that he was in any event, working for individuals who claimed the house. I didn't have the foggiest idea how he got in through the back. Yet, on the off chance that he had a key, why not use it on the front entryway? I needed to leave and call the police since I was practically certain that this was a burglary. I took out my flip telephone and claimed to peruse an instant message. What's more, I went to Kevin and offered something significant came up. However, he was on to me. I got a move on darting down the road. I could hear him yelling behind me. I thought back as I was getting into the van as I was running down the road. I ran quicker, and the van was not far behind. I went through certain yards, jumping over walls, anything to put distance between me and that van. I lost them several blocks. Then, at that point, dodged behind the shed and held on until the van blurred. When I had a real sense of reassurance, I called the police from my Motorola Razr flip telephone. They affirmed awful. The house proprietors hadn't moved in yet. Their stuff was set up by the trucking organization, and an inside decorator, however they weren't even in the country. I'd unconsciously helped in a burglary. At that point, I figured I could cause problems with what I did. I inquired as to whether I was in a difficult situation, yet they guaranteed me that since I didn't realize I would be fine, particularly since I brought in to report it. After talking with the police, I let them know all that I know. I didn't have the tag for the van. With the data I gave them, they had the option to find a few well springs of safety film. With that, they got both the van tag and a few pictures of myself with Kevin. Kevin was not his genuine name, but rather he was looked up some other time that day. He was captured and the stuff was taken back to the house. We likewise figured out that this was not his most memorable visit to that spot. He had been ransacking that house consistently for nearly 7 days. The neighbors didn't see since everybody was new. I surmise he grabbed a few more modest things. Then, at that point, he got insatiable and required help. That is where I came in. Kevin might have stopped while he was ahead, yet he needed more, and he got captured thus.